It's the Anfield Wrap with me, Rob Gutmann, standing in for Neil Atkinson, Paul Senior with me, Johnny Milburn and Josh Sexton. Andy Heaton producing. Don't like Andy at the moment. If you may be listening to the second version of this, you may be listening to the original. We've done one very bad version already. I hope you haven't had to hear that. Anyway, Neil's going to go mad when he hears this. Where are we going to start? We've had a week without proper soccer action, haven't we, Paul? But the transfer window slammed shut on us last Thursday, Friday, if we count the Spanish element of it. We've had, 4 or 5 days to sort of calm down, stop being fretful about this. What's your hot take, your cold take on this?
There was no Big Ben, so I was very disappointed. There was no chime on Sky Sports News on the hour when it shut. The hot take is I still don't know what to make of it, really. I know by the end of the show, I'm sure I'll have swayed one way or the other. I'm disappointed to miss out on what appears to have been our top target throughout the window. Obviously, that's Virgil van Dijk. Then we got our hopes raised that Liverpool were going to do some sort of mad £150 million spend, and we just got the one we thought we'd get in Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, which, don't get me wrong, I'm pleased with, and it's a good addition to the squad. But yeah, to have you sort of hopes raised that we're going to do some serious business and then get neither, yeah, I was a bit disappointed.
John, I've had some good-spirited exchanges on the internet with lads who are not too happy about the end of the window, arguing we were promised £200 million worth of signings. Even on the eve of the last day, we were promised £175 million worth of signings. And my case is, yeah, I'd love us to have got Van Dijk, and it feels like a miss to have not got him. But we do spend gross 150 million, and I am counting Naby Keita because he is secured and does cost real English dollars. The 200 million promise, so that's against the 200 million. The 175 million speculation by the media assumed we were buying Lamar for 90 odd million and not selling Phil Coutinho, I think. So I don't feel terribly let down the way I think some of our fan base do by the end of the window, seeing it somehow cataclysmic. What do you think, John?
Sorry, apparently my nose is whistling. So, what do I think? I think, first of all, I've had lots and lots of exchanges with people on the internet as well. And I really, really think we need, as a fan base, to stop trying to tell other people what to think. And I think there's a huge range of...
Have I just done that?
No, but there's a huge range of how people feel about things. And I think they're perfectly entitled to. There's a number of people who perhaps haven't engaged as fully with 28 unsuccessful title challenges, and maybe those people I feel a little bit more chipper than some other people, and I think we're all perfectly entitled to feel. I'm a veteran of Liverpool football seasons where we've just maybe been one short, or there's been a question of did we do enough, and I don't want to be at the end of another season thinking about those things. And I think because we've fallen short of our declared aims for the window, and we've got one potentially glaring weakness in the centre-half position, I think veterans of supporting this football club are entitled to be a bit concerned. Now, that's not to say that being concerned and perhaps being and voicing those concerns makes one person a better supporter than the other, but there's a lot of pious Reds on the internet who are sort of, you're either FSG in or FSG out, and there's nowhere in between where you're actually got reservations. Have we done enough after we've had a very, very promising start to the league season? And I think that's where I am. I question whether we've done enough of the right type of deals to achieve our objectives when we've made such a blinding start to the season. Now the other caveat to all that is you've got to look at our contemporaries, our peer set. Nobody's had an amazing window. I don't think you could argue that United.
We're going to do this, John, in some detail. I want to dissect them, so I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
But
you could argue that some of our contemporaries have got deals done earlier, and they were scrambling around less at the end. But in reality, nobody's had a 5-star window, and I think Liverpool have had a 2 or 3-star window by my expectations that were set by the messages that were leaked by the club that we were going to spend 200 million on players.
I think John's right to said his point where he says he's a veteran of needing one more. That's the bit where you hope it doesn't come back and bite you, I suppose. And I think on paper, once the dust settles and you look at the squad, we are a little bit stronger because you have got You've got Solanke who's come in, who looks good and fresh. We've got Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain who can sort of cover a multitude of sins. And I know the likes of Trent aren't a new signing, but he adds to. He's not someone I was this time last year counting as a first team regular or player. Joe Gomez. I mean, his performance against Arsenal is absolutely fantastic, and we know we've got a player there, but it's nice to have him back. But these are things that I say with the obvious weakness was January last year. Mane goes to the African Cup of Nations. Joel Matip goes through the ban with FIFA, even though he shouldn't have. I think on paper now we're a little bit better to deal with it. You've also got Grujic, who can come in and do a little bit more. So there's loads more going on. But then I think John's absolutely right as well to go, well, if you mention the transfer window, I always look at it in a way where you go, well, what did everyone else do? And Antonio Conte's now walked out of his job 3 times through not getting the players you want. There's the big hurry on the last day to get is Zappacosta comes in from Italy, and they try and do Barkley and they do Drinkwater. Now, I don't think in April, May, when they're putting together lists of players they want, I don't think Danny Drinkwater's high on that list. I really don't. I think Chelsea will have been looking across.
Paul, I'm going to stop you. I want to do these forensically in a minute and go through them one by one. I'd say the general point is who has a right to feel satisfied. Josh, you're putting your hand up at me. Furiously.
Yeah, sorry. I just it's on a point that Milburn made before about the sort of two sides, how the sort of
Mr. Milburn to you.
the FSG and the FSG. Sorry, I'm used to the nicknames. Yeah, the sort of FSG and FSG out. There's two ways of looking at the transfer window from Liverpool's point of view, and there'll be the people who point at last season and go, look at the mistakes we made, need to account for them. But also last season, like Paul said, there's a lot of variables why it went so badly wrong in January and February with Mane and Matip and etc. But also you can look at the flip side of that and say, well, we've strengthened, and then you can point at the positives and say that's going to be improved on, and you can try and prepare for the things that went wrong. But equally, there's certain things you can't prepare for. You couldn't just bring in a load of lads and then risk having unhappy players because they're not getting any first team football, just to try and account for the fact that we're going to have injuries, etc. It's you've got to sort of look at it both ways.
Yeah, I'll stay with you on Josh. The idea I think we always have as fans, which John raises, that we're just one short. I'm a veteran of just one short transfer windows, but if I try and take a step back and be a bit more rational about it, I think than my emotional response. I think that's because we realign our expectations. Virgil van Dijk, I think, is a classic example here. If you'd asked us in March, there was speculation Liverpool wanted Van Dijk in March, but there was speculation Chelsea wanted him, City wanted him, and Arsenal wanted him. And most supporters you spoke to thought, nice wish list player, but we ain't getting him if those guys seriously want him. So he wasn't the nailed-on solution to all our troubles back then. But as the window goes by, we find out we've actually achieved 50% of the task by actually getting him to want to agree to come to Liverpool, but we don't cross the line. So the expectation is a falling short. Whereas often it's a glass half full, half empty situation, isn't it? Or am I talking shite, John?
No, yeah, it is, and I think once we'd been bit on the arse by the fact that we'd been chasing him around Blackpool or whatever was going on, I think what people didn't realise is that it became almost principle for Southampton to not sell him. Like, people got their hopes up, and I did as well. I was thinking, going into deadline day, we're going to sign him. But if you look back at it, and I think Sean mentioned it on one of our transfer shows on deadline day, Liverpool can literally turn around and go, look, lads, we removed our interest. There's nothing to say that we were still, apart from the journalist reports and things like that. There's nothing really concrete to say that we were definitely still interested in him, because we'd almost put ourselves in that untenable position of not being able to go back in for him. He wanted Liverpool, so the other clubs didn't want to go in for him, knowing that he only wanted Liverpool, and Southampton didn't want to sell to us, and that was ultimately what's cost us the player.
John, the criticism that grew towards the club, to Klopp, FSG, towards the end of the window was, where's the plan B? Where's the plan B? With Van Dijk, this is how I think that the decision-making process must have gone. I'd be interested in what you would have done if you'd been there, if you'd been Edwards, say. They're coming towards the end of the window. They maybe do think they've still got a chance of Van Dijk, notwithstanding what Josh has just explained. They think they've got a chance of getting Van Dijk, but there is also a chance he doesn't come. Do you go, sod it, cut your losses, forget Virgil van Dijk and buy a £30 million plan B? Or do you say, it's him or nothing, excuse me, and hang in there for maybe having another go in January? What do you do?
Well, I think Michael Edwards have a bit more information than me in terms of, what has this been a thing with Southampton where Southampton have warned us off completely forever, or have Southampton left the door open for a potential deal in January? And you could make a case then for saying, okay, can we get through this pretty arduous next 3 months of football, get ourselves to 1st of January and then pick him up? Perhaps that's the indication that Edwards has been given. I think if you wind the clock back 12 months ago, I think 12 months ago, about this time, there was the first international break. I think we were by this point we'd lost the majority of our. We were beginning to start to see problems with our strike force, and I think that my issue last summer with the way the transfer window went was that many of our problems were entirely predictable. So we knew that Danny Ings was coming back from a long-term injury, and there was no guarantee that he was
You're
going.
talking 216 now, aren't you?
Am I getting mixed up with years?
No, I think you're talking 216.
So I'm saying that we had Ings' second injury was not entirely unpredictable. Daniel Sturridge's fitness was is not entirely unpredictable, but we still. When we knew about the departure of Mane for the AFCON, and so what I'm delighted about is the lessons been learnt from last year. We've got an embarrassment of riches up front from that perspective, and if you look at young Ben Woodburn, all but forgotten, can't get on the bloody bench, scoring worldies in World Cup qualifiers over the weekend. We've got a real embarrassment of riches up front, and you can't imagine the arse falling out of the front part of the squad over the next 3 or 4 months. You just cannot see it. You can imagine there's going to be good competition for places. I think the addition of Oxlade-Chamberlain gives us a real utility player that, even in the absence of
in addition to James Milner as well.
In addition to James Milner, and obviously we've got Lallana to come back. The midfield feels like a really good interchangeable unit. Lots and lots of players you can interchange. Fullback, we look really, really well covered. All of a sudden, we've gone from being a problem position to now we've got a couple of options for more games where we want players to bomb forward and where we need to sit in and be a little tighter. We seem to have good utility options there. At centre half, we've got 2 centre halves that we can all probably get. If we were to play, if you could get a bet on that one of those centre halves will be injured between now and Christmas, the odds would be miles odds on, and the drop down to Clavan is just too far. And 2 games a week between now and Christmas, I think to not have some cover feels negligent. And I know there'll be many that will be listening to this will say, well, Gomez can play centre-half. He's played less than 5 games for Liverpool at centre-half. And he's a great prospect. He looks like he's got all the tools. But if we go into another season and the season, God forbid, touch wood, this doesn't happen. But if we're technically out of all major competitions by Christmas because of a centre-half injury or a couple of centre-half injuries, then it will reflect on that window as being negligent, and that's my concern.
I think this is where I sympathise with the club a little bit, is that this is a Liverpool first choice 11 that takes all the big teams to task. You know, you're talking about a Liverpool side that can beat anybody at an 11, and now I feel like we've got a squad around, and I do agree with John. I think the drop from Lovren and Matip to Klavan is maybe too big. I suppose the argument is maybe Joe Gomez sits ahead of Klavan in the queue now. I don't know if that's the case or not. I think only time will tell. But the bit where I sympathise with the club is that yes, they want a centre half, and that centre half is Virgil van Dijk. Well, you might be able to get Virgil van Dijk in 3 or 4 months' time. So for you to go and spend 30-40 million pound on Johnny Evans, for example, a centre-half, which, you know, Arsenal and Manchester City were both linked with over the summer. This is a lad who sort of left Manchester United 3 or 4 years ago not in disgrace.
For about 8 million.
Yeah. For pennies, they didn't want him. He wasn't cutting the grade, and I think that tells you about how many good centre-halves are out there, first and foremost, but also that it's very hard to improve on these first 11 lads. And
I agree with
the
that.
thing is, John, if you've still got ambition to get in Virgil van Dijk, the lad you're trying to sell Liverpool to, whether it be Johnny Evans or not, is going to be looking at, am I Ranyar Klavan in 3 months' time? And that's a hard sell for me to a top centre half.
Before you cut back in, John, It's FSG could say to them, yeah, sure, you can have your plan B, 35, 40 million pounds sent off, but don't come to us for 70 million for Van Dijk in January. It is either or, boys. What do you want?
Yeah, and the point I was going to make was that being a centre half in a Jurgen Klopp team and a Liverpool is not like what Johnny Evans is doing for West Brom. It's a very, very, very different discipline, and I think everyone says surely there must be an alternative centre half round. There aren't many that have proven themselves to be able to play a high line, being able to play without the protection of a sitting midfielder in front of them, or a really defensive midfielder in front of them. So I recognise the challenge. I still feel that in the youth ranks, I don't see a young centre half. I'm imagining a situation you could conceivably lose a couple of games on the bounce in the league, and then have a couple of poor results in the Champions League, and the objectives for the season completely change, and that can happen as a consequence of one or two injuries.
Do you not feel if you've got England under 21's captain in reserve that Klopp's got to you've got to consider his development as well. I understand where you're coming from, but I just don't think you can keep pushing this lad down the order if you then at the same time want him to develop into the centre half everyone feels he can become.
But we can do it in other departments. So we've got, I don't know, is it 7 or 8 players who can play in the front three? We've got same number for the midfield. We seem to have 3 or 4 lads who can play at centre half. That's my concern, that we just the numbers game. We're not playing the numbers, playing it in all. I'm really, really pleased with midfield cover. I'm really, really pleased with forward line cover. I'm just concerned that we, just in centre half, we haven't got numbers.
I think it's interesting, John, that you said about that sort of defenders that can play the high line, because it's obvious that Klopp and Edwards have sort of sat down at the end of last season, sort of had their best 11 on the sheet and on a sheet and looked at it and said, what areas can we improve here? And they've earmarked who's gettable and who they'd want to be able to improve them areas. And Van Dijk's obviously one of the ones who stood out. It's interesting that you say about these alternatives and people go, oh, well, there isn't them. And then some people say, well, surely there must be. The fact of the matter is that of all these centre-halves in the world, Klopp thinks that only Van Dijk can improve on that area, and he's the only one that's gettable.
Moving on from the centre-half chat, which I think is going to be an endless subplot for us until January at the very least. Let's again take stock at an overview, Paul, a comprehensive overview of what we've done, because I'm pitching that I think it's my cold take 5-6 days later is that it's been a positive window. Yeah. We set out, I think at the beginning of the window, just before it opened in July, it had become established, and I think most supporters had bought into the following, that we were going to sign Mohamed Salah, Naby Keita, Virgil van Dijk, Oxlade-Chamberlain as the utility player, and a left back. That was where the talk was. We've got to the end of the window, and there's only one name we haven't signed there, and that's Van Dijk. I'd say it was taking a lot for granted to assume we'd get those over the line. To have got as close as we did isn't bad.
Maybe the one short Johnny references is Naby Keita. I understand we've signed Naby Keita, but we haven't. You know what I mean? He's not going to kick a ball for Liverpool.
Still costs real money, though.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's put him in on against City on Saturday.
But that's the other side of the coin, isn't it? That we can't do.
Let
that.
me stop you, because I'm going to do the same thing on the centre half. And your alternative is don't sign Naby and sign a plan B, because he wasn't available. No. You don't afford Naby next year. So what do you want?
I want Naby because we're very strong in midfield.
But you can't have him because Leipzig won't let you have them. So what do the club do?
No, I want him for next year rather than an alternative. Yeah. Sorry.
Fair enough.
So yes, I understand. The club, I think, have been proactive, and you know, it's tip my hat to them for that, because they've gone and signed a midfielder there that everyone in Europe wanted. This is a player Barcelona held a very good interest in, and he only seemed to want Liverpool. Don't get me wrong, in 3 or 4 years' time, he may feel a little bit differently. That being said, yes, brilliant. Are we covering all the whole business now?
Yeah. So, Salah, Solanke, whatever you want to talk.
Salah looks a wonderful addition. We were talking to him off air before we came in, and I think, as I've said in a couple of shows on tour, player that I feel like we got the perfect balance. I wanted us to get a lad like Sadio Mane, but I wondered whether his identical twin on the right hand side may have been a bit much of the same thing. I think we got the perfect balance. I feel Sadio Mane's fantastic running at you, and I think we got the balance that Salah can really get in behind, and we've seen that against Arsenal. We've seen glimpses of it against Hoffenheim as well. The other thing is he's a real poacher, like a Robbie Fowler number 9. You know, he's always in the right position for me, so I'm made up with that. The other thing is as well, what I've seen of Andrew Robertson, I'm really, really pleased with. I think we've gone from, and Johnny referenced it, we've gone from being really short in certain positions to looking really strong. And I think the emergence of Trent and Joe Gomez are going to allow Andrew Robertson a little bit of time and take a little bit of pressure off him so we can settle properly. And, we've got that new lad, Albi Moreno, as well, haven't we? So, and then
Like a new signing.
when I was in Berlin for the friendly this year, I thought I had a proper watch of Divock Origi got injured in the warm-up when I was watching Solanke quite a bit. I think we've got a real talent there, and it's no surprise to me that Origi went out.
And there's Oxlade-Chamberlain. But also, Johnny, the other big win, which is, I think, being taken for granted, but you don't have to see it as a win if you don't want to, but my feeling is we kept Philippe Coutinho. At the end of the day, we came under pressure from arguably the most prestigious club in the world, give or take a Real Madrid. They wanted him. They were prepared to pay very, very big money. The lad was prepared to walk on broken glass to get there, but we have retained him.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant news, and I personally don't. It might be later on in the agenda, but I don't personally think we're going to have a world of problems reintegrating him into the team either. If I can be slightly churlish about it, the story that Cy Hughes did a brilliant bit of journalism last week, and he published a story about maybe a little bit to the background as to why we were so resolute to keep him, and I
Was brilliant.
It's a brilliant story. I think if I was being a little bit churlish about it, I'm a bit concerned. It felt like a bit of a cock measuring competition between John Henry and the Barcelona.
But good.
Yeah, it's great, but it's true. It came across as being arrogant intransigence rather than, well, let's make a reasoned decision about what's best for everybody.
Johnny, can I dive in here though?
TV's Andrew Heaton.
Right, so I get all that, and I thought the size piece was the definitive piece on the whole saga. Thanks, Rob. What? Maybe it was a cock measuring contest, but then isn't football a cock measuring contest? Absolutely. We've spent years going, kind of accepting that we're not at this top table anymore. That we're going to lose our best players because we're this stepping stone club. Actually, you know what? Is right for going, you know what, but I don't care what you want me. You signed a 5-year deal. There's no clause in there. Tough shit. And maybe if we can stick to that, it won't just change the mentality within the club, it'll change the mentality with the fans as well. Why shouldn't we be as good as, why shouldn't we be as strong as Bayern Munich? Why shouldn't we be as strong as, walking around with a bit of a swagger? You don't see Bayern Munich and the likes get bullied.
Absolutely.
And we've been getting bullied for too long.
I don't disagree with any of that. My issue was, if John Henry's motive was, we are as good as any of these guys, we'll take them all on 2x2, fantastic. But the way I read the story, it was a bit of a personal thing, really. A former employee with a bit of a grudge, and he didn't want to lose the upper hand.
That was on Barcelona's side of it.
Yeah,
just
okay.
that might have been the case for Barcelona.
That's true. Pep Segura was the dismissed party, and he had something to prove. I think with John, to be honest with you, I think at the end of the day, whatever personal grudges John Henry did or didn't hold against Pep Segura, John, Philippe Coutinho is the club's sort of all but de facto best player. He has to have a stance on this.
Listen, I'm delighted we kept him, and I agree with everything Andy's just said, that finally, there's two big things that have happened this window. We've told one of the biggest clubs in the world to fuck off. Right, and there was money there. There was real money there. The type of money we all talked about being ridiculous money, and the club held firm and told them to fuck off. I'm absolutely made up of that. The other big thing that I took away from this window is the number of key targets who were choosing Liverpool Football Club over Chelsea, over Arsenal, over other clubs. It feels like there is momentum behind this club now, and whether you attribute that to Klopp or whether you attribute it to FSG, whoever you attribute it to, it feels like this club's moving forward, and that's my big thing that I've taken away from the window.
You forget sometimes that the real giants in world football, the real giants, there's not many of them, and we're one of them. But the problem for Liverpool is they've spent too long away from the top table, and the top table is the Champions League. And the difference in mentality and swagger around this club, where Liverpool are a Champions League club, is a completely different thing. But the thing we're armed with now as well is the most personable, lovable manager in world football. I mean, again, referencing being in Germany a few months ago, I was watching Sky Sport News, which is the identical Sky Sports News that we have here. there's a segment constantly about Jurgen Klopp going on now and what Jurgen Klopp's doing. The Germans absolutely love him. You can see that the Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, this is a lad who's took 60 grand a week pay cut or potential pay cut to sign for Liverpool, to be part of a project with this manager. And I think all the pieces are coming into place. But the other thing is, I think the day where Jurgen Klopp was appointed was the day FSG started having a go. That was their real big statement, and they're backing it. And you can tell through little things like this, and there's the stance on Coutinho is that Liverpool are not being this bully victim anymore, that they're starting to act like the giant they really are.
Josh, Klopp must have a hell of a sales pitch to some of these players, though. The club is in rude health, I think, arguably, possibly the best health by any objective measure for some considerable time. We're in the Champions League, the squad feels strong, money's getting spent, the ground's as big as it's been for a considerable period of time. There's a feel-good factor. But to get all of our targets to want to buy into the project, even if we didn't sign them all, there's got to be a lot to do with the manager, as Paul says.
Yeah, I think I know everyone hates the word, but Klopp's almost like the best project manager in the world. There's a load of good managers in the world who you could go to the club and you got your Ancelottis and Mourinho's and Guardiolas, but they're all known for sort of paying big money for players and having these really big squads, and quite often there's cast offs of that. Whereas Klopp is a manager who favours if he buys a player, he's going to sort of stick at him and try and improve him. And I think that's what a lot of people desire, is that sort of surety, especially football players. Desire that sort of surety, and Klopp gives that, and he gives a broader view of how things will be going in the future. I think it also shows the control that he's got at the club.
He uses the word development a lot, doesn't he, Klopp? And I thought the most sure thing coming into the transfer windows that Alberto Moreno would be a player of somebody else and no longer a Liverpool player. And the quote is, Alberto Moreno is 100% back. He was saying in January about who's playing well, who's the best player in training. It was Alberto Moreno. And I thought, well, you're not giving him much of a look, Jurgen, so how can you say that sort of things? But it shows some managers, and I think he's absolutely right what he's done with Mamadou Sakho, but it shows that if you're training hard enough and if you're willing to learn and be part of the system and do the things they want in training, that he'll give you the chance. So people are talking about, where does Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain play? Well, say he does have a drop in form, or you can't quite find his way. His career's not going to be dead with Jurgen Klopp, because he'll find a way. As long as you do the things he wants you to do, he'll find the way. Okay,
John, I mean, we started at the beginning, you and Paul began to talk about how our window could be perceived relative to our rivals. I stopped you in a full flow before we got forensic. Now's the time to drill down. Let's just sort of have the virtual conversations that our rivals are having in their version of this. Let's go one by one with the rest of the top six. We'll start with the worst first. I think unequivocally Arsenal had the worst window, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Arsenal's behaviour in the window has been pretty wild, to be honest with you, considering the issues that they've had. And I think if you try and read the mood music around Arsenal, it feels like the gamble of giving Wenger another 2-year contract appears to have been a mistake, because it feels like the players aren't necessarily playing for him. It feels like there's a number of players who want away, and their ability to attract players into the club. So again, you can only read what you pick up in the media, but the suggestions were that Lamar preferred Liverpool over Arsenal, and I suppose for the first time in maybe a decade and even longer, you can completely believe that, given that you'd imagine where Liverpool are today. We've been objectively behind Arsenal in league terms for the bulk of the last sort of 10, 15 years, and if you're placing your bet whether who's going to finish above each other this season, you would arguably pitch Liverpool ahead of Arsenal. And I think for them not to, first of all, to let Oxlade-Chamberlain go to a team that they would consider to be a rival, and then to have secured virtually nobody into that team, I think it's a disastrous window for Arsenal.
Josh, let's stay in North London. Spurs. It looked to be heading to a bit of a blind alley, their window. Saved at the last, saved enough. What's your take?
Yeah, I think it was sort of halfway through the window. I was looking at Spurs and thinking, for all the problems that we are perceived to have with our depth, they and Chelsea, who I know you're going to come on to, They've sort of got much worse depth than we had. And then obviously Spurs have come in with, was it 3 late signs? I think it was Sanchez, Aurier and Llorente, yeah. And I think they've just addressed the sort of key areas in the squad. So they lost Kyle Walker, Aurier's come in to replace him, and then you imagine it's
a better player.
Well, yeah, and you imagine it's him and Trippier fighting out over that. And I think people would also argue that maybe Trippier has his days better than Kyle Walker as well. They've got Llorente, which is one of the key problems last season. It's when they lost Harry Kane. Heung-min Son's not a natural striker, and if he wasn't on form, then it tailed off for them. And I think in Llorente, they've got someone who can genuinely, particularly in the sort of winter months, and Neil likes that theory of having a big man for you sort of worse weather, and Llorente will definitely do that for them. And then obviously Sanchez, I'm not sure if they needed that strength at the back, but they've got it. And when they've now got their fully fit 11, which is formidable at best, they've now also got a bench which matches that, and there's not so much of a drop off in quality as you saw. So yeah, they've definitely saved it.
Paul, I can see that they've redeemed their window, but I'm not sure it's a great window for them.
For Tottenham?
Yeah, I think I'll buy that Aurier may be an improvement on Walker. He's new to the Premier League, so he may not, even though on television viewing you'd pick him over Walker just about. Sanchez is an unknown quantity from a different kind of league and won't get in the first team straight away anyway. And Llorente is a sort of a journeyman forward we all like a little bit, but I think is a fair drop off from Harry Kane to him.
Yeah, the only thing I'd argue is there's a fair jump between Vincent Janssen and Fernando Llorente as well, and that's where
potentially, but only because Janssen was such a poor buy.
He scored 15 goals in the Premier League last season, Llorente, and
in a side built for him, yeah.
Yes, absolutely, but Harry Kane's not one to be shy of getting an injury, so they've now got an adequate replacement, and I think it does enable Son to play in his natural position a bit more. It's like for like what they've done a full back. Although I'd say Aurier is more of a loose cannon, more as a person than as a footballer. I think he might be one to watch this year in terms of his behaviour off the field. And then the centre half from Ajax, Sanchez, I don't know much about him. Kevin Wimmer went to Stoke, so I don't know whether that again is just like for like, or maybe that 10% better. I don't think they've improved massively. I know they brought in another backup keeper, but I think he's third choice keeper. But they were probably the strongest squad in the Premier League the last few seasons. The addition of the Champions League hasn't really hampered their league performance. They finished third and second in the last 2 seasons. They were pretty much the second place side. The year Leicester won it as well. So how they push on, I think their worst sign in the summer is going to be Wembley. You know, that's going to be something they need to get over quick. I know there's a bit of negativity surrounding it already, so they've got a year to swallow of that. So maybe the idea is just to be solid, don't really lose anyone, and hope they can crack on.
I think it's interesting that, you know, when you try and compare it to Liverpool and you say whether Spurs had a great window, what they've done with Aurier, Llorente and Sanchez is they've bridged the gap. So Sanchez is a highly rated 21-year-old. They've got him for £30 million. You'd assume he's better than what they had in Wimmer as a backup centre half. Aurier, you know, whether it's him and Trippier fighting out, there's now better competition at that right back spot when Trippier wasn't getting a game and Walker was. They've basically shored that up. And then Llorente bridges the gap between Wimmer. It's really hard for them to improve on that first 11 because it's so good when everyone's fully fit. Compare it to Liverpool. There were obvious gaps in our first 11 where you go, we could improve there, and we have done that, but comparatively, they're just quite hard to compare, I think.
There doesn't seem to be any uncertainty surrounding Spurs, though. That's the one thing they can take, is that the manager's on a solid contract, all the top players are on solid contracts, they're not paying. The only thing of discontent you heard is that maybe some of their players are starting to say, well, we're looking at what other people are earning, and you're not paying them sort of wages. But I think they'll be there or thereabouts again this year, Tottenham, there's no doubt.
Okay, Chelsea, the champions. John, sticks in the craw saying that still, don't know why. Very interesting window for them. It feels there's a lot of uncertainty considering there are champions around them.
Yeah, obviously you've got to caveat everything you say. The squad looks weak, but they are the champions. I think the fact that the Costa's situation just appears to be in abeyance, and that's a really, really strange set of circumstances, and I'm not quite sure what goes on there. They've added Morata. I've just sold Morata out of my fantasy football team, which means it's guaranteed that he's going to get a hat-trick at the weekend. and obviously they brought in Bakayoko and Drinkwater. They don't feel like
And the fullback as well.
yeah.
Zappacosta.
Yeah.
They don't feel as though they are. I hate the phrase, but marquee type signings. They're mid-range rather than game changer. But I think I'm surprised that Chelsea didn't go bigger in the window. But I think you could say that about everybody. Well, I'm sure when we look at City have gone big in cash terms, but you don't feel as though their squad's been transformed. And you don't. I'm going there confident on Saturday.
I think with Chelsea, I think they've done like for like again, haven't they? So they lost John Terry and they've let Kurt Zouma go out on loan. So they brought Rudiger in, German international, highly rated, but no one really knows what to expect. Bakayoko again, he's on like for like with Matic. I'd probably rather have Matic. And I think if you honestly asked Antonio Conte, I think he'd rather have him. Morata's gone like for like with Costa, and then they were very light.
At best. Yeah, I mean, Costa has a proven pedigree.
Morata's no mug. I mean,
No, he could be sensational. But
this is
there's
a
no
£60
guarantee.
million striker from Real Madrid who's only being held out of that side because Karen Benton is so good.
Sure.
So I'm not sleeping easy. The fact that I'd be facing Morata, there was a host of top clubs in for him when he was available. So I think he's good. And the one thing, the smart move, and it's not one that I thought they'd make, is Drinkwater. I mean, they've rekindled probably the most formidable midfield I've seen in a long time in Kante and Drinkwater. There's something to be said about that, I think, and I don't think this is anything by accident where they've just took them individually on the merits. Them two as a pair were absolutely fantastic. I think Drinkwater's really underrated, and I think he'll start regularly for Chelsea. I think there's this thing he's been brought in to make up the numbers. I think Ross Barkley was being brought in to make up the numbers, but I don't think so with Drinkwater. I think it's a good signing. I was interested to see they let Zuma go. That was still a bit of a strange one. I think he's got such a bright future, and maybe
Prefer Christensen, didn't they?
yeah, they preferred him, and I think he was on loan last year, Christensen.
He has been for a couple of years.
And Nathan Ake, they let go.
And Nathan Ake, yeah, of course, I'd forgotten about that one. So I don't know if they were a little bit short-sighted. The thing is with a loan, obviously, that he gets to come back one day, but centre half is maybe where they're weakest, I think.
I think it's interesting with Chelsea is that they've been a team who've historically since Abramovich sort of came in, they've been a team that's always had this magnificent depth, and it's almost like it's come back to bite them now because the good players they've had on the fringe of the squad, they're sort of slowly starting to drop off, and then now you're going to start to see more from Chelsea, that noticeable drop off in quality between the first 11 and what they've got on the bench. And I think this summer where Conte, there's sort of rumours of the infight and things like that, it's going to be more obvious the problems they have over the course of this season, particularly if they get injuries. And it's not been the best start in terms of that because Hazard's been injured, and the whole Costa situation is interesting because he's their top goal scorer from last season. And I know you could say with any signing there's no guarantee, but to replace your top goal scorer and your sort of talisman in your team, and bear in mind they're replacing the whole spine as well, really, by John Terry or whoever you want, Gary Cahill subbing out the team, going and playing Rudiger there. And then they brought in, I know Kante and Drinkwater was that formidable partnership, but are they going to play the same sort of football that Leicester played? And do they have the striker to do that as Leicester did with Vardy and Mahrez? It's all ifs and buts, really. But
well, I don't know. Our friend Phil Blundell, if he was here, what he would be pointing out, so I'll point out in his stead, John, is that Chelsea played only in one competition last season to all intents and purposes, albeit they had a good FA Cup run. But the main competition they were involved in was winning the league title. They had fewer injuries than anybody else. They made almost an unprecedented number of changes throughout the season. That was a thin squad. Phil would contend that had they had 2 or 3 more injuries, their drop off in points may have seen them not win the league. They come into this season wanting to be serious players in the Champions League. They've let players go. We've seen Zuma out, we've seen Matic out, Costa's effectively out. Feels to me, and the ghost of Phil who isn't quite here, feels to us like Chelsea have done is repopulated a squad that wasn't big enough in the first place. That if they have anything like a mini injury crisis, they are absolutely in big trouble this season.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really fair assessment. I think their injury record was stellar, and I think a winning team that's winning every week miraculously don't get injured. it's always the teams that are having a bit of a crisis of confidence that all of a sudden one or two drop out. And that's not me suggesting that players aren't really injured, but they want to stay when the team's going for the league and you're at the top of the league and you're flying. People recover a lot faster and they want to get back into that team. And I think you're right, Rob. I think their total. I haven't looked at it, but I would imagine their total numbers haven't swollen dramatically to cope with going on multiple fronts. So it'll be interesting to see how they do once they get one or two, particularly in key areas. Maybe they've got the same vulnerability I've discussed with Liverpool. What's their cover like at centre half, for example?
Paul, let's move on to the two Mancs. They're the biggest net spenders, City and United.
Yeah.
Let's look at them together. How do you view the summers they had one by one?
I'll start with United. I think I was listening to Sam Matterface talk the other day about Mourinho. Said he had a sit down with him in the Lowry Hotel, and this was May, June, and he said, "What do you want for the summer?" He said, "I want a striker, I want a centre half, I want central midfielder, and I'd like a winger." He went out and got 3 out of the 4 of them. Perisic didn't
As did
move.
we,
Yes,
in a way.
yeah, but Mourinho's. He said he had a similar conversation a few years ago, and he went, "I want Cesc Fabregas and Diego Costa, and if we get that, I'll win the league." Mourinho's one of them fellas who goes, I'll have 4 primary targets." He's not going to go and buy 12 lads in 1 year. He sort of just brings in quality all the time. And I don't know, I've not seen much of Lindelof, but I know in Lukaku and Matic he's got 2 very good Premier League players in. Surprised with the ease he got Matic out of Chelsea. I'm still gobsmacked about that. But Lukaku, I think the one thing they did miss was a bit of a bully for the smaller sides. And Lukaku is brilliant against them sort of sides. I think he scored about 200 goals against West Ham in about 3 games. So he's the sort of lad who may cure them problems because he is such a big pest and a bully. Their midfield looks formidable now. I would say, I think adding Matic to an already relatively strong midfield, I think you'll see Pogba jump on a little bit.
But effectively lost Schneiderlin in January,
Yeah.
so Matic is his replacement in that midfield.
A much better one.
But a big
Much
upgrade.
better.
Big
Big
upgrade.
upgrade, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We saw that a year and a bit ago, though, when Matic, after Chelsea finished 12th, and Matic had a bad season. And why?
Do you hear him call him loyal? I read loads about that, and I don't know if it looks to the problems that Jose Mourinho had at Chelsea towards the end of his tenure, but I think it was Nemanja Matic is a Jose Mourinho player. There's no doubt about that. And he looks one of the best when playing for Mourinho, and I don't think he did look one of the best players under Conte. But when he plays for Mourinho finds the way of getting it all out of
last
them.
year.
No, yeah, but he didn't last long in his last year, did he, Mourinho?
There's a lot of variables of that year anyway. To
Absolutely,
be fair,
but
You could throw that accusation at nearly the whole team.
the only person he really lost was Rooney, and what he did do is he's got Martial there, sat there, not doing a lot, and then Zlatan will be fit around the time you're going to need him. So bringing Zlatan back, I think, is probably going to prove to be good business in a time where Lukaku might need a rest.
I think
City then, John.
I think it'd be interesting to look at United's fixtures because whilst they've been anointed champions by the press, haven't they? And they've had a blinding start, but they've not really played anyone of note yet. So let's all calm our excitement for a little while. Lukaku's got a trait where he's formidable again. He's a quintessential flat track bully, and it'd be interesting to see how they do when they play top 6 teams or top 5 teams away from home, and if he's not firing. And I think it'd be interesting because I think they're the games where a player like Zlatan can make the difference and it'll be interesting to see when those games are scheduled. Actually, I know United have got to come to our place in October. I've not looked at when the rest of the games are, but I think Lukaku away from home against the top 6, that could be a potential vulnerability for United.
I think it's almost trademark Mourinho. What you're seeing is that he had last season to sort of feel out his team, and you saw a lot of a United team that didn't really look like they knew how they wanted to play. And obviously, the signings that he did bring in, didn't really add much pace to his team. This season now, I think with Matic and Lukaku in particular, you're really going to see United getting towards exactly how they want to play. And that they, for me, have probably had the best window of the top 6 on that basis, is that they're now really coming towards this sort of finished product of where Mourinho wants to get them. He probably would have liked the winger because they're still lacking that little bit of pace and width. But I think they are probably the team that's coming closest towards their sort of final form, if you will.
With City, then I think they've
City have had a really similar window to us.
They've remedied the problem position very aggressively, haven't they? So they've identified both sides of fullback. I've never really seen a side do that before. Bomb all four and bring 4 new ones in. In Danilo, I thought that was quite a wise move because he can sort of play in midfield as well. Will want games. Walker, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but Kyle Walker's one of the best fullbacks in the Premier League. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Benjamin Mendy,
could be sensational.
Could be sensational. I mean, he's part of this very, very exciting French squad. And then he brought in a new goalkeeper who there's been not a lot spoken about, but people who've been watching him saying if you wanted to find this goalkeeper who can play with his feet, with this lad's like a quarterback, but in goal, his passing range is meant to be phenomenal. I think who he lost in terms of Sanya, Zabaleta, Clichy, Navas, Fernando, these are no losses to a Pep Guardiola
Is
side.
Yaya Toure effectively gone now?
No, he's been on the bench. Yaya as well. So, I mean,
Iheanacho as well.
Iheanacho went, yeah, but I mean, I think the emergence of Gabriel Jesus sort of killed him about January last year, didn't it? So, they're very, very strong in squad. But then I think what John touched on before is I really don't fear them coming into the weekend. I really don't. And I think with all the money spent, maybe when Pellegrini went, they weren't quite as strong as everyone thought they were. They were very old, weren't they? They were massively in decline. And I think when their owners came in, that they did spend a lot of money and bought a lot of players, but they didn't really refresh it quite as much. They did bring De Bruyne in, and they've added bits of quality more, but they've never really overhauled quite in the way. I don't know if that's FFP or whatnot, but they've had to this year with David Silva coming to the later stages of career. Yeah, the same. So they've had to do that. But still, I think because they've still got Aguero, Yaya and Silva in reserve, that they just look so strong.
I think they've had a sort of slightly inflated version of our window in that they had some fat which they need to trim, which maybe not the case with us this season. But I think you've seen us do that over a couple of years now. We've become this new Liverpool team. They've managed to do that all in one summer with their the older players that Paul mentioned going out. They've addressed a couple of key weaknesses in the squad, but I think the one thing, if you said to City fans they'd change about the window, is that they'd really want that centre half, and it almost gives you that indication of how hard it was for us to get Van Dijk and for us to find an alternative to Van Dijk possibly, is that their number one centre-back target they were chasing all summer once Van Dijk was gone was Johnny Evans.
Do you think, John, that I buy into the mantra that going forward, City against the teams they can flat track bully are going to be irresistible with their wide men and De Bruyne and Aguero or Jesus. But I do wonder in a battle what steel they've got in central midfield still. I agree with Josh about centre half. I think they need Gundogan back and firing. Fernandinho, yeah, but I look at some of the others. I say United central midfield options, our central midfield options, and say theirs going forward look fine, but as a screen, as a battling, what's the opposite, quintet trio, I worry they don't have that trio.
No, I think people overlook Fernandinho. I think Fernandinho's got a lot of quality, and again, we talk about this Roto Fantasy Football League. I think when you play that, you start to examine players' numbers in a little bit more detail. Yeah. And I think he's one of those players that's quite deceptive with the eye. He reminds me a bit of Dietmar Hamann in that you don't spend the game watching him and you're marvelling at the things he does, but when you do, he's a really, really effective midfield general, if you like. And I think I wouldn't underrate him, but I wouldn't fancy him against Naby Keita.
Yeah, the thing with City is, though, isn't it? They've basically abandoned playing midfielders now. Yeah. They've just sacrificed them for forwards, and you're seeing Kevin De Bruyne playing probably the number 8 position now, where naturally he's a number 10. And then you think to yourself, what do they do? What does he do at the weekend? He surely can't just play one lad in midfield and 5 forwards against Liverpool. You wouldn't imagine he'd be so arrogant as to do that. And I don't know whether this is one where maybe he does bring Yaya in. Maybe he brings Yaya in for the top 6 when Gundogan's fit. Maybe he brings him in. I don't know. I can sort of see his logic in just going, I'm just going to attack these sides that play 11 men behind the ball, and we've identified it as one of our own problems, and maybe Pep's going, well, the only way to cure this is to just get the best attacking lads on the pitch and hope there's a bit of magic in them. This weekend, I think he's in for a bit more of a test.
Sorry, Rob, just to jump in on the Steele thing in City midfield. I think he's got Pepsi is a lot of players in his team who he can interchange, and I think the likes of Danilo and Mendy, who are possibly the players who will give you a bit more steel, he knows that he can drop them into midfield if they need that against the bigger teams.
Okay, we've done the best of the rest. Let's talk about the mighty Reds again. We've looked at it, our setup in the context of the transfers, but let's just take stock of the squad as a whole now. There's been a lot of sort of talk about he's like a new signing across the squad, and that's caused some irritation, I think, with those who want to see a certain number of bodies brought in the transfer window. But when the dust settles, some of this is true. The squad does feel richer than it's been in some considerable time, I think, John. Let's just go. I think you're looking at it now. I've had this conversation with several Liverpool fans over the course of the last few days. You can pick two really good Liverpool 11s now, and that feels like something we haven't been able to do for a while.
Yeah, I think you tweeted something similar the other day, Rob. I think you put
both Paul and I had a go at this,
and I think it's and there was even some debate, wasn't it? I think Milner was missed out. I think Milner would have got into the midfield in the second team, no messing around. And I think it feels like we're in relative rude health from that perspective, notwithstanding the comments I made earlier on about centre half, where I still think that's probably our biggest vulnerability. But I think keep the centre halves fit. Let's be right, centre half should be one of the positions on the pitch where it's easier to keep players fit. They're covering much less ground. Neither of our centre halves rely heavily on pace, so you'd imagine that it would be an opportunity to keep those guys fit. But yeah, I completely agree. I think you could imagine. I know Neil was a fan a couple of years ago of having a Lucas captain in a League Cup team and almost having a shadow first team for the Cups, and we've got more than enough numbers to do that.
Well, two things, Josh, occurred to me. Is one that Klopp has always lamented that he doesn't get a winter break in England, which I think was a key part of his strategy in Germany. That's how he kept his team so aggressive and able to sort of get at teams and keep running throughout the course of the season. Is they got to go again after the Christmas recess. He begins to have those kind of options now, and I also think he begins now to see options on the bench for the first time. You look at what team we might put out. If he goes unchanged this weekend against City from the team that demolished Arsenal, he could look at Coutinho and Oxlade-Chamberlain coming on 60. Milner to shore up a game. It feels quite incredible, really incredible, and move forward.
Yeah, I think we've just got a really good balance in our squad now. I think that the drop off in quality between a couple of your options, but barring the Clav and Gomez shout, I think it's so much less than what it used to be. But also we've got the young lads who will be able to give game time in certain cups. We've got a battle on four fronts this season. I think now we've got a squad big enough to deal with that, barring some massive injury crisis, which we've not been afraid of having. But it'll be good to see them young lads get a game, and it's interesting that Ryan Kent and players like that have gone out on loan. I thought maybe it'd have kept them around for them games, but we definitely have now enough quality to be able to deal with the league campaign and also put up a fight in the Champions League. But we've also got the young lads who can come in for them lesser games.
Paul, a lot of focus on where we pulled up short last season was the defence, but in truth, Liverpool's tail off from January into February, we stopped thrashing teams was because when we lost Mane basically, and also we lost Coutinho to injury, and then latterly Lallana. I feel one big issue that people are taking for granted a bit is that it seems like we've solved the pace issue by bringing in two extra pacey wingers to supplement Mane.
Yeah,
and sorry, can I also add? And I think the rehabilitation of Moreno adds to the pace.
Absolutely,
asset pool.
There's a thing at the beginning of last year where in pre-season there was talk from Klopp about him having this fullback that can arrive late as well, and then all of a sudden James Miller was there, who's not naturally the most pacey lad on the side. So Moreno, I think that's the attribute he's looked for in Moreno and Robertson, is the fact that if Liverpool are bombing forwards at pace, well, James Miller can't catch these speedy lads up. But Moreno could, especially if one's on the ball. So that's an interesting thing. And you're just seeing a Liverpool side now that can just tear at you. And we've got other lads, the additions of Salah and Oxlade-Chamberlain, don't slow that down. We're maybe moving Lallana from midfield where he was being very effective to right side of an attack. Sort of, it was a touch too many. There wasn't quite the same ability of the lads that were there. So yeah, we look strong, and I think you're now looking at that midfield and going, well, who's your creativity coming from? And both of ours have been missing at the start of the season. But you can now look at towards the weekend and go, well, if you can reintegrate him, Coutinho can fill that position. Lallana's probably 6-8 weeks away from adding further depth. And we have, and I think the other thing is as well, I've touched on it earlier in the show, is that the three young lads, Woodburn, Gomez and Trent, have just added a sort of value to the squad that you didn't quite realise was there.
They feel ready, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've a lot of time we'll be crying for this sort of local lad or whatever. Well, okay, they're not quite that, but these are products of good buying at academy level. So this is sort of what we had with Sterling, where you go, well, there's someone there in the background who might be ready, but sometimes it doesn't happen. We look at Pacheco or Suso, but actually we've got three lads there who are ready, who can add to the squad a little bit. Maybe not every week from the start, but they're not. It's not an absolute tragedy. Like what with no disrespect, but what Kev Stewart felt if you were playing, you felt you were really scraping the barrel. These don't really feel like that. Trent's obviously got a very bright future, but then if you're calling on Ben Woodburn, well, he's shown what he can do at the weekend. And this is all good. This is all good. So you've got your squad, and then that additional bonus that we've got is very, very strong.
John, just to bring this edition of the Anfield Wrap to its a fairly natural conclusion, it's felt to me, just talking about the last week and the issues in front of us at the moment, that it's hard to talk about our club at the moment without feeling incredibly positive. We've got a new player if just coming into this weekend, and maybe these are very famous last words, and football is a fickle motherfucker, but we've got to look forward to a debut for Oxlade-Chamberlain. We've got to look forward, hopefully, to Coutinho coming back into the fold. We hope we've got players coming back from international duty feeling confident, like Ben Woodburn. We've just beaten Arsenal. Confidence is an all-time high. We're back in the Champions League. Just at this moment, it feels good to be a Liverpool supporter.
Absolutely, it does, Rob. And I think we go to City at the weekend with no fear, and I think we typically go to City not feeling great fear, because I think they're a team that we've got a reasonable record at their place. I think last season's game could have been 3-0. We could have beat 3-0. We could have won 3-0. We could have been 3-3-all. Josh and I sat together. We had we shared some chocolate treats during the game.
Sounds weirder than it is. Though.
Yeah.
Who bought them, Josh? Did the older man buy
them?
The
older man bought them. They let him get moist in his pocket. No, but I think we're all really excited about what could potentially happen for this Liverpool team. I think the other thing I would add is that, dare I say, it feels like and you can assign it to Tony Barrett if you want to, and you can assign it to Peter Moore if you want to, but it feels as though there is very, very slow incremental movements towards the club actually beginning to listen and understand some of the challenges that supporters face, and I think the announcement last week about the support for those who've got to pay an inordinate amount of money for the visa for Moscow, it just feels great. I was involved last week with somebody who was picking up tickets for the local supporters, the £9 ticket scheme, and I was really impressed the rigour with which the club vet that somebody's actually from Liverpool, and they have to prove your photographic ID. You've got to prove your address, and I think they've begun to address the problems of those tickets getting out to tout. And it just feels like incrementally off the pitch, the club are starting to move in the right direction. It's very, very early signs, but I'm feeling warm and fuzzy about the club at the moment for the first time in quite a long time.
Yeah, see.
That's the last word then. Thank you very much to Paul. Thanks to Josh. Thanks to Johnny. Thanks to Andy for producing and a very good brief intervention. Neil back next week. This has been me, Rob Gutmann. This is the Anfield Wrap.